Good afternoon, Tom. Thank you for being here for the Tom Answers Your Questions series. One question I'd like you to answer is something that came up in one of the Patreon Q&A sessions. Is entropy fundamental to consciousness?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'd say the answer would have to be yes. And the reason that that's the case is that entropy is fundamental to what is called irreversible processes. Okay, if you have a process that's reversible, that means the process can go forward and then it can stop and it can go backward and go right back where it started from and end up exactly in the same state. Okay, so movies are reversible. You can play a movie and you can back the movie up and it's exactly at its state. But life, most of the natural functions in life are not reversible. Consciousness is not reversible in the sense that consciousness thinks a thought, comes up to a conclusion, it can't unthink the thought and go back to exactly where it was. You see, so thinking, awareness, well, not necessarily choice, because you could unmake a choice, but the choices are all choices of awareness in consciousness. After all, consciousness is awareness with a choice. So awareness is not a reversible process. You can't become, oh, now I'm aware of that. Well, I don't like that. So now I'm unaware of it. You see, it doesn't work that way. When you're aware of it, you're aware of it, period. It doesn't, you can't become unaware of it. You can pretend to be unaware of it, but you can't erase what has happened. So, just fundamentally for that reason, entropy is natural to awareness. Entropy is natural to consciousness or fundamental to consciousness. That's because entropy is a measure of disorder. Well, when you have things that are not reversible, then you can't get back to the initial state. Every time you make a choice, every time you move forward, every time you do something in your process, a retreat to the old process isn't possible. So what happens is that over time, things tend to run downhill. Things tend to run out. Things tend to run out of energy because you can't back up to the point where you had energy. As you use energy, you have to find more energy. Well, with humans, you have to eat something, right? You have to take on energy so that you can continue on. You can't go back and get the energy you've already spent. All right, so energy gets expended and cannot be retrieved. You have to replace it with another source. So that is why entropy, grows. In all natural processes, entropy increases. Another way of saying it is when you use up energy, you can't just grab it and reuse it. The fact of using it makes it unusable again. That energy's been used. Okay, well, there's only so much energy available. Energy's finite. And when you've used it all up, there isn't any more. So things tend to run down, things tend to dissipate in the very long viewpoint. Even a block of steel, if you just had a big foot square of steel or foot cube of steel, you'd think that would last forever. It wouldn't. If you just sat and looked at that cube of steel, you'd find out eventually it would evaporate and there wouldn't be any steel left. That's because there's little particles of steel, little molecules of steel that get enough energy in that vibration where it's shaking that they fling away. So everything has a vapor pressure, even steel, which means that the vapor is, of course, the molecules that fly off that are now what we would call steel vapor. So everything has a vapor pressure. Everything runs downhill. Processes are not reversible. Those little processes of the molecules vibrating, they can't stop and say, "Oh, let's just vibrate and reverse and we're back where we were." No, you can't do that. In the process of vibrating, energy was lost. Heat was performed. That heat goes away. Now you have less than what you began with. You have to feed it if you want it to keep going. So things that keep going, we have to feed, like people or plants. They have to take in nourishment, take in what, things that they can make energy out of. And all of that means that entropy slowly increases if you don't put energy in to stop it from increasing. Okay, well, with us, we keep putting energy in our bodies, so we can actually make the entropy decrease for a little while. Our body was all exhausted and shot, and we couldn't do a thing, but now we rest and we eat, and now we can get it. We can do a whole lot again. So our entropy was really high there for our physical system, and now it's lower again. It has a capability of doing a lot more work because it's reconstituted itself with more energy. It ate. So all natural processes are that way. Like I say, even the vibration of the molecules end up giving off heat, and that heat dissipates and goes away, goes just kind of off into the universe and disappears. So that is also the nature of awareness. Awareness is irreversible. Awareness can't go back to being an unaware state like it was, and therefore there's a little loss there, if you will, or potential loss.
So you're making an analogy between the second law of thermodynamics that rules this physical
Hmm.
virtual reality and comparing that to consciousness.
I am, because both of them, in terms of entropy, both of them work the same way in terms of entropy. In order to lower your entropy in consciousness, which is the same as raising the quality of your consciousness, you have to put in effort. You have to feed it. You have to put work into that. You have to try. You have to think about it. So the analog, though it's different in consciousness, it's all in thought space. It's not in physical space, but the concept works the same way. You have to put energy in. You have to put effort and work into it in order to keep the entropy low. If you don't do anything at all, if you just let it be however it is, entropy will naturally start to increase, and you will end up, you know, de-evolving some. So you have to keep putting effort into it, because if you don't, then eventually that ego will grow a little bit, and you'll feel a little bit superior to the other beings that aren't as far along as you are, and so on. It always takes some effort to think about that and say, well, all right, I can see from this perspective, I'm I'm further along than they are, but that doesn't make me better than they are, just different than they are. You see, that takes some effort to come to that viewpoint. We have a natural tendency to think, oh, yeah, we're better than they are. That's kind of the high entropy viewpoint. So it takes effort to see the picture in a more constructive, lower entropy way. So
Well,
yes,
we tend to think of ourselves as consciousness, we're immortal and invincible and perfect and things like that. But
we're we're really not any of those things. We're immortal when it comes to being in this virtual reality, because we can just, we don't die. We just come back in as with another avatar. So in that case, we're immortal, but that's kind of a special case. As long as we are experiencing virtual realities, then we have awareness. We're aware of the change, the rules, the things we're doing, the choices that we're making. But if we don't have a virtual reality, not even the one of communications, just nothing, then there's nothing to be aware of. There's no game. There's no definition of up or down. There's nothing. So then we just sit there like in stasis, all potential, no actualization of potential, just potential. So that's what would happen if a player got retired. If the LCS said, well, this player is a non-contributor, let's just retire that player. The player doesn't have to be dissolved and deleted or anything. It just has to be taken out of the virtual realities. And then it just sits there as potential. It doesn't experience anymore. It doesn't have the experience of being anywhere.
And without experience, there's no growth.
Right. It's not growing. It's not
So
doing anything. So it's kind of on the sideline,
that
if you will.
speaks to your purpose of why we are in these virtual realities.
Exactly. To lower our entropy, because that's the direction of evolution. Just like in our physical reality, we have criteria for for evolving in that, and that is we need to survive and we need to procreate. If we fail to do either one of those things, then we're done. We become extinct and we're no longer part of the game, no longer part of that virtual reality. So to evolve in that reality, which means to become more, to adapt, to grow, to integrate with other things, to evolve in that reality is, again, it's a lowering entropy. It comes down to the same thing, finding order where there was disorder. That's lowering entropy. Understanding where before there was none. You see, I'm better than everybody else doesn't require much understanding. But when you see bigger pictures and realize, well, actually, you're just different. You're not really better. You have your own challenges, your own skills, your own ignorance, your own fears, your own whatever. You are what you are, and you're just different than other people. Yes, you may be better at this or at that, but that doesn't make you superior. It just makes you different, not better. So when you see it in that way, then you don't puff your ego up and feel superior. You don't feel arrogance. You don't feel that ego. You don't feel all of those things that are counterproductive to a low entropy reality. Our understanding lowers our reality, whereas in the physical world, to lower your entropy, you have to, again, learn, grow, see bigger pictures, and do things that are efficient and effective at making you and the world, a better place. That then is called evolution. Whereas if you do things that make the world a worse place and everything's running downhill, then that's de-evolution. That's going backwards.
I'm Tom Campbell. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're enjoying the content. If you do like our content, then you should consider being a Patreon member, because Patreon members get early access to our special content. You will also be able to get your questions answered by me in special Q&A sessions just for the Patreon members. And most importantly, your contribution as a patron member will enable us to produce the content that you're looking for. So thank you.
So evolution is a universal kind of concept. Evolution applies to everything. If you have a self-changing system with awareness, then you'll have evolution. Now, in the Earth's viewpoint, we are the awareness. The plants, the animals, and so on are the awareness. And the Earth itself may have some awareness. Not like our awareness, but some sort of awareness. Anything that's aware, well, entropy is going to apply to it. Entropy is fundamental to any irreversible process.
Consciousness is there with potential in the
Yeah,
beginning.
yes, it just has potential. It can become something wonderful. It can become great. It can become something awful,
Mm-hmm.
something nasty. It's
Mm-hmm.
just is potential. And in the big chat room, that potential just wasn't actualized very much. It was still mostly just potential. All right, now it had a virtual reality in which it could communicate. So it communicated. So it made friends, it made enemies, it did whatever it did in this big chat room. But it remained mostly potential because it really didn't have a very meaningful set of challenges or
Not enough
choices.
of a challenge.
Yeah. So then the system says, well, we need another virtual reality besides a chat room. We need one that everything is connected to everything else. That way, if you do anything, it affects others. And if others do anything, it affects you. Everything is connected to everything else. And that way, the feedback is immediate and massive. You do things that other people or the environment doesn't like, the environment and the other people react to that in ways that are unhelpful, that make things worse, that raise entropy. So entropy is a natural, a natural thing for any system that can evolve. You could also say it that way. If a system can evolve, then entropy is really the key to that evolution. Our evolution based on procreation and survival, well, means we have to be efficient at survival. We have to learn how to avoid danger. We have to learn what's poisonous, what's not, what kind of animals to stay away from, and which ones you can eat. We have to learn a lot of things. That's lowering entropy. We're creating valuable information out of, there was no valuable information to begin with. We had to figure it all out from scratch. So that's lowering entropy. That helps us survive. And the procreation is the same way. The way you win with procreation is you have to procreate faster than you die. If you die faster than you procreate, then eventually you disappear. So your procreation has to be effective and efficient. You can't, if you're a bug and you lay 1,000,000 eggs, then things like weather, suddenly a cold snap that kills hundreds of millions of those bugs almost instantly that wasn't expected. Well, that's not a problem because you lay so many eggs that some of them will be in warmer places. Some of them will be little tufts in the ground. Some of them will be inside little holes in trees. Some of them will get by. And those some, even though that's only 1/100th of 1%, well, each one of those ones that survives will come out and lay 100,000 eggs. So you can reconstitute yourself even with just a little bit of success. So you have to have strategies for survival and strategies for procreation that are low entropy, that are efficient, that work. So actually we could say that lowering entropy is really what we have to do to evolve anywhere, even in this virtual reality.
And would
Low
you
entropy
say,
evolves.
sure, would you say that lowering entropy is um, ongoing and positive and moving towards a more efficient system? And high entropy, if you want to translate to here, is high entropy would be wrong decisions, a wrong path, less caring for others. That's rather limited. And at what point does that implode? Too much high entropy.
Well, like any other system, you have things called tipping points. If you get a system that's, let's say, balanced, you have like the old balance, with the lady holding the scale and it's got two pans in it. You put things in a pan. Well, there's tipping points. If you've got so much weight in this pan and you start putting weight in that pan, you put some things in it and it doesn't make any difference. So you put some more and it doesn't make any difference. You put some more and it doesn't make any difference. But eventually you put some more in and the other pan starts to rise up and you put some more and it goes higher. Well, that's like you've reached the tipping point where suddenly you've done enough that you make changes. Your system basically starts to change in a important and significant, irreversible way. So we have tipping points in social behavior. As long as everybody is being polite, then mostly people get along reasonably well. when things happen and people start being more rude and less polite, then that starts to break down the social structures. Instead of people being polite now, they get nasty with each other. And the nastier they get, As other people get nastier, they get nastier, which makes the other people get nastier. And the whole thing gets to a point where, okay, that can come back again to being polite unless it just gets past the tipping point. If you get past a certain tipping point, it doesn't come back. It just keeps getting nastier all the way to the bottom to where you can't get any nastier. Everybody is absolutely as nasty as they can be. But that tipping point isn't necessarily easily reached. There are things that would help pull that back. In other words, there's things that would lower the entropy. So once you raise entropy, it's easier to raise it more. And once you lower entropy, it's easier to lower it more. So you have these two forces. And the tipping point is where you're kind of gone past the point of return. Then you have to de-evolve all the way to the bottom and start over. So yes, you have these tipping points. So we can stand to get worse and get worse, but you get to a tipping point where if you get much worse than that, you won't be coming back. It'll just be a slow slide, down the slippery slope until you get to the bottom. So that's the way that works. But it also works the other way. As you get lower and lower entropy and people get nicer and nicer, that makes it easier for everybody to be nicer. And if everybody's nicer, then that makes it easier for everybody to be nicer yet. So, it works the same place. And then you can get to a tipping point where you're going to optimize your ability to lower entropy. You're
And
going
by
to slide
nicer,
down. Yeah, you slide down that slope and then you optimize everything. So by the time you get to the end of that, everybody is optimized. All of their needs, their wishes, their fulfillment, what they'd like to do. They have the maximum amount of personal freedom to make choices about their life and what they do, and everything's maximized. So that's kind of the opposite point. So we're here in the middle someplace trying to get to the good side of the tipping point, and there's negative stuff going on that's always dragging us back. But yes, there are tipping points where it just kind of you get an avalanche. You can pile up snow only so far, and then eventually it gets critical, and then all it takes is something to start the first thing rolling, and you end up with an avalanche down that side. That's a critical point. And that's systems are like that. They have breaking points. They have critical points. Like a car. And if you never do maintenance on your automobile, you never change the oil. You buy a car, it's got oil in it, and you just drive it. You drive it and you drive it. You never put any new oil in, you never change the oil, you just drive it. Well, eventually it'll get to a critical point. It'll work for a while, probably work 2 or 3, 4 years. But eventually it'll get to a point where it'll go critical and you can't drive it anymore. It's just done. And you probably, if you do that, you probably will not start that. You probably will have overheated the block and ruined the engine. And it's not just putting oil in it now won't work anymore. Whereas before that would have fixed the problem. Just put some new oil in it, change the old oil, put in some new, and you could have gone on and on. But once you go over that tipping point, it's not that easy to come back. Now it takes a whole new motor to get back in the game. So yeah, life's like that too. We go up and we go down. If you look at the entropy in humanity, it's not a straight line. It wiggles up and down, as things happen. You got more wars and it goes down, you get between wars and it goes up. So you have that, but there's an incline to it. It's getting better in the average. It's getting better all along. So there's an uphill climb there, but it always takes energy to climb uphill.
thank you very much for that.